If you're not shifting your weight or turning like the pro golfers do, you are missing out on a key secret to a consistent golf swing. In this next video, I'm going to show you exactly how the pros do it and how you can do it too. So we're talking about golf weight shift versus hip turn in the golf swing. Now, the best players in the world, and what I recommend to you is getting a blend of both. I don't think you should be just shifting one way in the backswing and shifting in the downswing. And also conversely, I don't want you just turning or rotating and just rotating on the downswing. You need to have a blend of both, which is what the best players in the world do, hit consistent side golf shots. So typically what your better player will do up to the very best in the world. Now, I like to call it a bit of a pressure shift. Now, let me explain. As I set up to a ball here, this is the same whether you're using a driver, a hybrid, or a driver. It's the same thing. As I make my backswing, I've got most of my mass directly in front of me here. I've got about even weight distribution, about 50% on either side. When I make the backswing, this is what I want you to do, and do this with me if you can. As you begin to rotate, as you get to the top of that backswing, and it doesn't matter how far your backswing is, even if you can only get to there or 3/4, it doesn't matter. You might be a senior golfer or someone at least over 40 and you fall into that category. When you get to about here, you should feel about what I call pressure into your right instep here. You should feel about a 70-30 ratio. So 70 here and 30 in the front. Now, as I'm turning like this here, I'm pushing into that side there. Now, I'm making a very centered turn. I'm not doing this. I'm not shifting right over like this. If I was to get all of my mass on my trail foot, which is what I'm not suggesting you do, that would be something like this. If I take that lead foot off the ground, that's getting all of my mass on this side. That's not what I'm suggesting you do. I'm suggesting you make a very centered turn, the head relatively still. It can move a little bit, that's okay. But as you turn, you're getting that pressure in there. That's what the best players do. That's what I recommend you do, even if you can only get to there. Now in the downswing, we want to shift this pressure to this side. And again, I want to feel about a 70-30, 70% pressure in that lead foot here through to the impact area. I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect. That's roughly what I work on, but I'm talking foot pressure. Very important you understand. I'm not talking about, as you come into impact, having 70% of all your weight on that lead leg and your upper body. It's just the pressure into that lead side. And you can probably tell as I make my backswing like this, it probably doesn't even seem like I've got 70% pressure, but I do. That's where those pressure mats and that you see often if you've had a lesson, and they can tell how much pressure you're putting into the ground. Again, in the impact downswing, there I'm pushing into the ground with that lead side. Now, another checkpoint in that backswing and the downswing, this trail leg of mine, if I'm doing it correctly, this is a really good checkpoint you can do in front of a mirror or video. Always recommend doing video of your swing. As you turn, this trail leg should be on a slight angle pointing back in towards you. If you get in that sort of spot, you see yourself in the mirror, you know you're in good shape. Somewhere like about there somewhere. And conversely, or I should say in the backswing, you don't want to be like this, with this leg pretty much straight up and down. That's no good. You want that angling back towards you. And in the downswing, we kind of want a little bit similar. Again, very slight angle. Having it straight up and down is not too bad, but we just don't want it too far over this way. Now, if you're someone that you feel like you're not shifting weight correctly, you're not turning correctly, it's a great idea to exaggerate, to do the opposite. If you're someone that doesn't shift properly and you just very much turn back and through, you might need to feel like you do get a little bit more this way. Exaggerate it a bit first, and then you've got to find a happy medium that works for you. If you're someone that feels like you don't get this weight to this lead side on the downswing, you might need to feel like you move a lot more this way as you come through. Now, to help you out in this downswing with this pressure shift to that lead side, what I'd like to see you do as you get to the top of this backswing is to feel like you don't just bump your hips. There's a terminology used a lot in golf instruction that I do not like, and it talks about when we get to the top of the backswing, bumping the hips towards the target. But unfortunately, what I see for most golfers, when they do that, when they get that bump, their hips get too far this way, and what it does is it tilts the upper body back, and they get into what's called secondary access tilt. And from here, it's a very awkward position. Quite often they flip, not to mention it's really bad on your lead hip joint as well. So I like to see you, when you get to the top of the backswing, you get that little bit of a shift over, not just your hips, but your upper body as well. Just a little shift. Your lead shoulder will go down a fraction, and it may only be 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inches. It's different for all golfers, but you'll have that little shift, and as you're shifting, you're continually turning or rotating. I don't care if you call it rotating or turning. To me, it's all much the same thing. Rotating, turning, they're all referring to the same thing. So I'm getting that little shift and rotating at the same time. Now, there's two little keys that you can do to help you get a better weight shift and a better hip turn. So as I set up to one here, during your backswing, don't be afraid to let that trail leg straighten. Now, I'm not suggesting you lock it out like this, but certainly let it straighten. And what that does, as I do one here, if you let it straighten just to about there somewhere, you'll find it gets you the hip dip, your hips can turn better, and you can get into a really nice spot here. So a little key there is just letting it straighten. If you keep it too bent, you find it restricts your hip turn there. But if you let it straighten, it makes it so much easier. Now, the other thing you can do at your setup to make things easier for you is make sure you have those feet flared out. I see way too many golfers every weekend on the course looking like this. You have a look at my feet there, pretty much straight down towards the camera there. Make sure you flare them out. Just experiment with how much you need to flare it out, but it will help you get a better weight shift, helps you get a better turn, better rotation, has so many really good benefits getting in that sort of setup like that. Now, in your backswing, ideally, I'd like to see you, now as you start your backswing with the takeaway, the hips won't move too much in the first sort of foot or so, but gradually the hips will turn. Now, I'd like to see, if you can, depends on your flexibility, what you're able to do, but just do the best you can. Your hips will get about 45-degree turn, and your shoulders will get about 90. And again, it just depends on what you're capable of doing. That's just as a general guideline. They will get to a point where the hips will stop and the shoulders will keep rotating. Same on the downswing, those hips will move first, shoulders will rotate, and we'll be shifting pressure through to the impact position there. Now, if you're someone like this, I see this again every week on the golf course. If you're swinging the club and you're finishing your swing and your trail foot is still flat on the ground, you're not shifting pressure correctly or you're not turning. A great fix for that during your swing, and you can practice this with me right now, as you're coming through to impact, after you get that shift, I want you to get that trail foot, feel like it rolls on its instep like that. Rolls on its instep. We strike the ball, and then it comes right up like this. If you get to that position, your finisher, you know you've shifted your weight correctly, you've turned your hips will be pointing right towards the target. You should be balanced, and you'll hit the ball further and a lot more consistent. Now, showing you that just from a down the line view to give you another look at it. So as I get to the top of my backswing, I've let that right leg straighten a bit. I've got pressure in that trail foot. As I start down, I'm rolling that right angle slightly in, that right ankle, I should say, come through to impact, through, up onto that toe, through to the finish. Now, coming up, I'm going to show you some footage of some pro golfers. I'm going to show you something really interesting. When you look at these swings, one thing I want you to really pay attention to is I'm set up here. If I was to draw a couple of lines on either side of my hips, I think this is where a lot of confusion has come in. A lot of people want to get rid of the slide. A lot of people push their hips like that and they slide. Everyone's trying to get rid of their slide. It's a very common mistake. And to get rid of it, a lot of golfers have ended up just spinning their hips and turning without getting any weight shift, and they're leaving all their weight on their trail side. Now, what I'm going to show you in this video is really fascinating with the pros, but if I set up here and I draw a line down either side of my hips, as I make my backswing, you'll see my trail hip will move slightly inside that line, but the line on my lead hip, as I move through to impact, I will get well in front of it. That's the weight shift. Every one of these good players you see coming up, you'll see their lead leg get well in front of that line through to impact. That's how they compress the golf ball with their irons. That's how they hit the ball first and a divot second. That's how they smash their drivers, their hybrids. They're using that pressure shift here, and they're using that pressure shift on that downswing, which is absolutely key. And that's what makes them so good. And guess what? You can do the same. It doesn't matter what handicap you're on now, what skill level you're at. You can easily implement these keys I've just spoken about and start hitting the ball a ton better. So have a look at these videos. Leave me a comment down below because I want to get your feedback on what you think about them. Have you understood everything in this video okay? And if you have any questions, please let me know. I want you to make sure you watch this next video coming up because it's going to talk about the left shoulder in the downswing. Now, it's important that you combine what I've spoken about today with this left shoulder. The two of them go hand in hand. It's going to talk about that left shoulder at the start of that downswing going down and rotating. And when you combine that to what I've spoken about here, you're going to start hitting the ball incredible.